general, we're talking about joy
Right.
and happiness. And we're talking about two different forms. The positive form, which is more of a Torah form, which would be a type of a serene, internal, peaceful type of a joy and happiness. And we also spoke about some of the more negative forms of joy, which might involve, scoffing, being crude or inappropriate, and things like that. And in discussion of being in the mood, the text also went into the idea of drinking wine, and by extension, I suggested that what he said would apply to other mood modifiers, and he was talking about the negative effects of drinking wine, alcohol, and other types of mood modifiers, and the different types of behaviors that result of that. At the end of the class, we just started talking a little bit about the positive side of drinking, and how drinking wine is part of the Jewish tradition, kiddush, commemoration, sanctification, and things like that. And we talked about Pesach and Purim and some of the ideas about the inner dimension of wine. Remember I discussed, you were not here, were you? Yeah. But one of the things that I mentioned, without going too much into detail of what we spoke at the end of the last class, was that the gematria of wine is 70. Nichnas yain yotze sod. So the gematria of wine, yain, and secrets, sod, is the same, implying that there's some connection between wine and things which are hidden. And we were just exploring how wine can reveal hidden things in both a negative, but also in a positive way. And it's the positive way that we're interested in bringing into fruition in holidays like Purim, where if a person knows that when he drinks, what's going to come out is going to be negative, harmful, crude, rude, so there's no mitzvah to drink. It's a mitzvah not to drink. Yeah? If he knows that because of his drinking, a lot of secrets of the Torah will be revealed, he'll be privy to insights that he might not normally be privy to, so then by all means, that's the type of drinking that we're talking about. In any case, I just pointed out that nichnas yain yotze sod is the Hebrew phrase in the Gomorrah for what we're talking about, and it's based partly on the gematria equivalent. That's the numerical equivalent of the words. You familiar with that?
Yeah.
In Hebrew, you have Hebrew letters, which are numerical. So it's 70, and that's the page that we're on. Page 70. Daf Ein. The first, the second paragraph. Excuse me. Umnam shtiyas yain tov meod bizman she'ashasiya kadas. Drinking wine is not only good, but it's very good when the drinking is done in measure, when it's done properly. Al minig maskilim, according to the behavior of people who have enlightened demeanors. Kederach she'amar Shlomo, like King Solomon said, Tenu shechar le'oived v'yain le'marei nofesh. Give alcoholic beverage to one who is lost, and wine to one who is bitter of soul. Meaning wine can be used to lift up a person's spirits. And if a person's a bit down, a bit depressed, a bit, lethargic, so there's nothing wrong with having wine to kind of stimulate himself a little bit and affect his mood positively, and that's okay. King Solomon said it can be used in measure as a stimulant for, from time to time in order to get a person, into the mood. Yishtei v'yishkach, it says, Yishtei v'yishkach rishoy v'amoloi lo yiskar od. So a person who does drink, he'll forget that which is poverty, that is paining him, or amolo lo yiskar od, or his effort, meaning his trials and tribulations, he will not remember them. In other words, it kind of enables a person to forget about his troubles. So that's usually what we find to criticize about wine, drinking in order to forget one's troubles and so forth and so on. But according to this, a person is allowed to use wine in order to forget one's troubles, where the intention is to try and jumpstart into a better mindset, into a better mood. Of course, the Torah is not condoning alcoholism or anything that would even have a person, start that habit. Yeah, but the point is that from time to time to jumpstart, it's permitted. And furthermore, it said about wine, wine gladdens God and people. How does wine gladden God? God does not drink wine and God does not become inebriated, and so how is that so? But insofar as people use wine in the context of a mitzvah, that gladdens God. When people use wine for Kiddush, people use wine for the 4 cups of Pesach, people use wine for Purim, people use wine for other types of scenarios, like receiving guests and giving them wine to honor them, to make a bracha, Brei Pri Geffen over. All of these contexts, God is happy with wine. There's also, by the way, of course, a wine libation that was offered on the altar in the temple. Just as God derives some pleasure in the sacrifices, God derives pleasure in the wine libations as well. And maybe an even more important reason than all of this why God is happy with wine is because if wine makes people happy, and we're talking about happy in the good sense, where they're able to temporarily forget some of their difficulties and therefore kind of jumpstart their service of Hashem through passion and enthusiasm. And as a result of this, they are doing what they're supposed to be doing. So that's another reason why wine finds favor in God's eyes, because it can be used by people to help them get onto the right path. Uksiv, and furthermore it says, V'yayin yisamach levav enosh, wine gladdens the heart of a person. Red wine makes you feel so fine all of the time. So too the verse says, Ki tovim doidecha miyayin, that your beloved are even better than wine. So you see, wine is good. The words of Torah are better than wine. The words of Torah are sometimes compared to wine. Just like a person become inebriated and happy through drinking wine, so a person can get high on Torah. And just like the drinking wine makes a person happy, so learning Torah makes a person happy. Just like wine can be used to put a person in a good mood and forget his trials and tribulations, so words of Torah can also put a person in the right mindset and help him kind of forget his trials and tribulations. The Gemara says, "Achash birosho yasok b'Torah." A person who has a headache, yes, should be engaged in Torah. Achash birosho yasok b'Torah. That's what the Gemara says. According to this, if a person's got a headache, and even though he said, I can't learn. My head is clogged. I got a headache. I can't learn. It's exactly the opposite. If he puts his mind to the grindstone and he sits down and he starts learning, and he really gets involved in his learning, the learning can actually help his headache. Why? I guess that a headache is often a result of constriction. It's somewhere in the body. There's something constricted. But the Torah is something which is very expansive. So if a person's learning the Torah properly and it opens the expansive nature of his mind, that can often kind of loosen up whatever point of constriction is the result of that headache that he's having. And therefore, on a literal level, the Gemara can be understood that learning actually dissipates the headache. But more kind of akin to what we're talking about here is, the Gemara says, Achash barosho yasok b'Torah, which literally means somebody who feels his head should learn Torah. How do you feel your head? You feel your head not only through a headache, but when your mind is full of all types of thoughts and extraneous thoughts, and you're burdened down with distracting types of ideas and so forth and so on. Regarding this, the Gemara says, Achash barosho yasok b'Torah. If you're disturbed, preoccupied, and worried about different things in your life, so escape, run away to the Torah. Learn the Torah, and the Torah will at least temporarily enable you to forget and get your mind off of those things. And very often, after learning, kind of, touching into the spiritual realm through the venue of the Torah, a person comes down from that experience of learning and with a different perspective. And he's able to put things more in perspective. So as before he started learning, he thought that something was such a terrible situation, he's wondering how he's going to deal with it and so forth and so on. After his learning, he might find, it's not so bad, it's not such a big deal. He might actually find some solution that he didn't think about before because his mind is now open and more relaxed. And therefore, Achash barosho yasok b'Torah. So he says, Tovim dodecha miyayin, the words of the Torah are greater than wine. Why? Because they gladden a person, they warm up a person, they open his mind, they enable him to forget the things that might be troubling him, and so forth and so on. And furthermore, it says in the second paragraph there, about 5-6 lines down, V'nemar, and it says, V'chikech kiyayin hatov. Maybe your palate is like good wine. From all of these, he says, we see that there's a very praiseworthy aspect of wine, when it's done in the ways of the wise, who drink wine in measure. Nowadays, modern studies seem to indicate that it's very healthy for the body, good for the heart, and also for the brain to drink wine every day, right? A little bit of wine every day. In times of old, wine was much more a staple of people's diet and their beverages, because water wasn't always so readily available. It wasn't so easily available, and if it was, it often went bad. It went off because it might have all types of impurities in it, and so forth and so on. People made wine, stored it in barrels. The barrels were in the cellar, and they could draw upon the wine as a beverage throughout the entire year. And the fermenting process and the alcohol in the wine itself kept it, it was like an antiseptic. Is that right, Jerry? Yeah? So people drank wine, much more regularly as part of their regular meals, even, in the weekday, and, certainly, on Shabbos, but even in the weekday as part of the meal. The Rambam writes it's very good for digestion. It's not healthy to drink water and other liquids shortly before eating, or during one's meal, or even after the meal. And the obvious reason is because the liquid dilutes the digestive juices in the digestive tract and prevents the body from digesting the food properly. And the food isn't digested properly, doesn't have the digestive enzymes to the proper concentration, then the food it's going to take longer to digest, and it's not going to be broken down as effectively. So it's going to put much more stress on the entire body. But a little bit of wine, Rambam says, is very good. It aids the digestive process. It helps break down the food, and so forth and so on. So it's very good. It's very good to have a little bit of wine with your meals sometime during the day. And like I said, the modern thinking is that it's very good for your heart, blood cholesterol levels, and things like that. Yeah. So that might be an expensive habit, but I suppose if you have just a half a glass a day, that's considered to be a good thing. Well, now that I'm speaking about it, I'm going to do it. Yeah.
Wine back then was watered down quite a bit, so the wine we drink would be like a concentrate for that too.
Yeah, that could be. Although the Gomorrah speaks about it in other terms, which is that in their times it was much more concentrated. They would dilute it. It's true, but my understanding was that they would dilute it in a way which would make it like our wine. You're probably talking about diluting it even further so that it would be like more of a beverage. It could preserve it in its concentrated form, pour water into it in order to drink it, and avoid kind of like the inebriating effect of it, right?
Yeah, I mean.
So they drank it more like a punch. I don't mean like a spiked punch. They drank it more like a juice.
Yeah, I'm referencing maybe 1,000 years ago how people, I don't know exactly back then, but wine traditionally was used to sanitize the water that they drank. And not so much to get drunk.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, in Talmudic times it wasn't used to get drunk, but they drank wine, as part of the meals. And the regular concentrated wine, the wine that was stored, was called yain chai, living wine. Yain chai, that's what they call it. It's called in the Gomorrah. Yain 2,000 years ago. It's called yain chai, concentrated wine. And when the Gomorrah talks about pouring a cup of wine, using the word limzog, mezigat kos, pouring a cup, it doesn't mean pouring out a cup of wine. What it means is, as the word mizug actually means, it means like to mix, not to pour, but to mix wine. And it actually refers to the fact that they would pour water into the wine concentrate in order to make it palatable as wine. So there's a teaching in the Talmud which says that it's actually not a good sign for it to rain in the land of Israel during the holiday of Sukkot. in Israel, the rainy season is in the winter. We start praying for the rains in the winter. The rainy season, when we're considered to have a bountiful, blessing of rain, usually starts around the holiday season. But even though Sukkot is the beginning of that whole process, and during Sukkot, a lot of the themes of Sukkot are about rain, water, stirring up divine favor for rain, and so forth and so on. The Gomorrah nevertheless says that rain that falls on the holiday itself is not a good sign. It's not a good sign. And the Gomorrah compares it to a servant who comes to pour wine for his master, and the master throws the bottle of water in his face. So it's the Gomorrah, just on a little level, it's not so easy to understand. The person is coming to pour wine for his master, and what the master does is he throws a kiton shalmayim, he throws this vessel of water in the face of the servant. What does the water have to do with the wine? He's coming to pour wine out for his master, and the master is pouring water. Now, clearly, the pouring of the water in the face is kind of like the rain, right? But what's going on here? So based on this understanding of mizug ukos, you can understand what the Gemara is talking about. It's compared to a person who's coming to pour wine for his master. It doesn't mean pouring out wine in a cup for his master. It means to prepare a cup of wine for his master by mixing water into the wine so that the wine becomes drinkable. Okay, and that's he comes to limzog kos. He comes to pour the cup for his master. It doesn't mean to pour out the wine. It means to mix the water into the cup of wine so that he can drink it. And what's the meaning behind this? Wine is red. Water, of course, is clear or white. In Jewish understanding, wine is associated with what we call din. Din is judgments, harsh judgments. Water is chesed, which is like loving kindness. And the point here is that on Sukkot, we are trying to stir up divine favor in order for us to be meriting the blessing of the rains throughout the winter. But it's also a time of judgment. It's being the time of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And this parallels the analogy, the servant coming to pour the cup of wine for his master, meaning pouring water into the wine, that's tempering the judgments associated with the redness of the quality of the wine with the water, which is like divine mercy. And the master, rather than accepting the cup, rather than enabling the servant to mix the water into the wine, meaning to temper the judgments with loving kindness, the master throws the water before the servant has a chance to bimamtik the dinim.
If it rains on Sukkot, yeah?
Yes, that's the idea. If it rains on Sukkot, the point is God is saying, you're coming, right, to use water in order to temper the judgments in order for there to be a nice, good, bountiful, rainy season. But before you do that, God takes this rain, takes this water and throws it down before actually able to temper those judgments and change the din with chesed to rachamim. This is the idea of mezika sakos. Now, according to that understanding, it fits in very well. Otherwise, what's the pouring, and what's the wine, and what's the water? But according to this explanation, it all makes very nice sense. In any case, that's what it was. In times of old, in Talmudic times, they had very concentrated wine, and they would pour water in it in order for it in order to be able to be drunk. But that doesn't. But they might very well have used it even in Talmudic times for the reasons you're saying, either to, make it to flavor the water or to sanitize the water, right, with the alcohol as well. So you have then a lot of very good qualities to wine. Mikol ele neda shevach yain kashu mishpat chachamim hashoisim kashiur sheyigbar hasechel el yain. If he, for example, how do the righteous drink? They assert the influence of the mind over the wine, and don't allow the inebriating qualities of the wine to overcome the mind. So according to this, that's what we're talking about with drinking on Purim. If the mind can harness the property of the wine, then the mind can use the wine to reveal hidden secrets. But if the wine subjugates the mind, so as a result of this, the mind is going to be under the influence of the alcohol, and that's not going to be a good thing. That's going to be a harmful thing. והשויסים בזמן הקבוע עם אוהבים ורעים ועם חסידים וצדיקים ולא עם ארטילויים וריקים, people who drink regularly with their loved ones and with their friends and with the pious and with the righteous, but not with abusive, coarse, empty people. Wine can be used to actually add wisdom to those who are deep. And the wine itself, he seems to be saying, is like a tree of life for those who get hold of it. There's an opinion in the Gomorrah which actually says that the tree of knowledge of good and evil was the vine. And the reason that the Gomorrah gives is because you should know that a person would only come to sin when he's filled with a foolish spirit. And therefore we see that the tree of good and evil, knowledge of good and evil, was the vine, from which there was poured into him an evil spirit. He was intoxicated, and that caused him to transgress. There are different opinions, different other opinions about what this tree of knowledge of good and evil, or the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was. According to another opinion, it was the fig tree. And the proof brought for this by the Gomorrah is the fact that after Adam and Eve sinned and they became aware of their nakedness, their sin had become exposed, they're discussed as covering themselves with the leaves of the fig tree. There's yet another opinion about what the tree of knowledge of good and evil was. A third opinion was that it was the etrog, and a fourth opinion says that it was the wheat tree. The wheat tree. According to this, wheat, or at least a certain strand of wheat, used to grow on trees. Have you heard this before, Emmanuel? Wheat in the Garden of Eden, at least there was a certain strand of wheat that grew on trees. So this tree, the Etz Hadas, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, was wheat. And the Gomorrah gives a very interesting explanation as to why, because a person does not say Abba until they're old enough to consume a certain quantity of wheat. Meaning, a child is when a child is able to consume a kazais of wheat, a certain amount of bread like this, they're at a stage of development where they actually coincides with their ability to speak and say Abba. Okay, Father. Question is, like, what's the point? The very interesting explanation that particularly the question is strengthened when you think about, on the one hand, you're talking about the sin of Adam and Eve, where they rebelled against God, and that's being compared to the child being able to say Father for the first time. I don't know what's the correlation, right? It doesn't seem to be any correlation, particularly when you consider the fact that there's like nothing more endearing than a child's saying Father for the first time. A parent, whether it's a mother or father, is just waiting until it's like, say Abba. They're not ready yet. Another few weeks go by, say Abba, It's so cute. Another few weeks go by, say Abba, Abba, Abba. He said it. He said Abba. Did you hear? He said Abba. Say it again. There's nothing more endearing. And this is being compared to the transgression of the sin. Like, what's the idea there? So it's true that there's nothing more endearing than when a child says for the first time, Abba. But before the child says Abba, what do they say? Ah. The child is in awe of the father. For the first time the child experiences to Abba, it's the first time that they start to quantify the father. And once a child quantifies the father, that plants the seeds for rebellion. Because once a child thinks that he can know, understand, comprehend, wrap his mind around his father, at that point, he can already start thinking, well, I see it differently. Or maybe he doesn't understand. or I'm actually more intelligent than.
I think it's once you show them that much interest when they say it, they see a key of manipulation, and they manipulate you for you failing on them.
Yeah, that's right. Children are aware of that. So in a way, this is what happened here. That it was the wheat tree. Why? Because that represents a person's das. When a person has the ability to kind of have cognizance of God, then a person can start to rationalize and second guess God. And ultimately that's actually how they were lured, according at least to the mystical explanations, into transgressing. Because the Satan saw that Adam and Eve were very upset that they couldn't partake of this experience. They didn't understand. They realized that they were created in order to connect to God in all ways. Yet this way was barred from them. They couldn't partake of the knowledge of good and evil, and therefore they were limited from experiencing God in all ways. And this was very upsetting to them. How could God create them for the purpose of connecting to God in all ways, yet bar them this very integral way? And they were sitting there scratching their foreheads trying to figure that out until the Satan came and said, hey, what's wrong? They said, we're really upset that we can't connect to God. And Satan said, you're 100% right. In fact, God wants you to partake of this. That can't be. God told us if we do, we'll die. Wake up and smell the coffee. Don't you get it? God's testing you. He wants you to see whether you hurt so much and whether you have such a longing to cleave to Him that you'll be willing to do it even under the threat of death. But once you do that, you'll have eternal life. He wants you to have that fruit. Go for it. Take it. So Adam and Eve, oh, wow, this makes sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you know what? Even if it's not true, in the end of the day, life without connecting to God on their level in every way is not worth living anyway. So either way you go, you're okay. If the serpent is telling the truth, then eating the fruit is the way of passing the test. Because we're demonstrating how committed we are to connecting to God in every possible way, even under the threat of death, when that threat is fictional. And even if it's not fictional, so life's not worth living if it's not connecting to Him in any way anyhow. So they went ahead and took the fruit. The serpent telling the truth or lying?
Lying.
Telling the truth.
How?
The serpent was telling the truth. It was God's intention that they partake of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That's what God wanted. But just not then. The test was not, as the serpent portrayed it, to partake. It was, as they had originally understood, to refrain. If they had passed the test and refrained, they would have perfected themselves by listening to God. They would have gone into Shabbos in the state of perfection. And the mystical works in Judaism say that God would have actually given them the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil for their Shabbos meal. And you know what they would have gotten for dessert?
Eternal life.
The fruit of tree of life. That would have been, yeah. So the one would have been their cholent, and the other would have been their compote. As it turns out, it didn't work that way. How did I get onto this topic? Because it says, V'etz chaim lemachzikim ba. He says about wine, that wine is like a tree of life for those who take hold of it. Of course, we usually talk about water in Torah and the etz chaim. Here he's saying that wine is that way as well, because he's already introduced and we've elaborated how wine itself can be used to increase one's Torah, and Torah is like the etz chaim, so that wine becomes like this etz chaim. V'od, and furthermore, hayayin yosiv chochmas hamaskil v'yachpil shtus ha'avel. Wine has got this quality of being able to increase wisdom of the wise, but double the foolishness of fools. V'chadesh avas oyev. It can also renew the love of one's loved one. That's why couples have romantic dinners over glasses of wine. Yes, it's to renew and rekindle the love, the ardor, the desire. And therefore wine can smoothen out wrinkles. Yes, different types of wrinkles wine can smooth. If a person has some wrinkle with somebody and they sit down and have a drink together, they can just wrinkle. Excuse me.
Otherwise, it can make the situation more volatile. If you've been arguing with your wife and then you got to drink over wine, you can raise the emotions and make it more volatile.
Yeah, that's also true. That's also true. I guess it really depends. I mean, a wise person can get wiser because of it, and a fool becomes more of a fool because of it. It has both the qualities. You were here yesterday when we talked about how the blood of the vine is described by our sources as having two components: the blood of the animals that the Satan shechted in order to irrigate the wine with, and the water that Noach used to irrigate the wine. So that both of these components comprise the blood of the grape, and therefore either of them can come out. That's what you just said. It can renew the love of one's loved one, and it can stir up the hate of the hate that one feels towards one's enemy. It's got the good blood and the bad blood. V'yiftach yad hanodiv v'yichazek lev hakilai. Look at that. It can cause a generous person to open his hand, and a stingy person to close it even harder. V'zos midas shoysei yain. And this is the quality of those who drink wine. Yosim hayayin refua l'da'agaso. He can use wine as a remedy for his worry. V'yischazek b'Torah l'lamda b'simcha. And strengthen himself in his Torah study to learn it with joy. Ki kol, and he's not talking about, of course, it's important, I mean, I hope I'm not stressing it too many times, but of course, it's not talking about getting drunk and learning, right? It's talking about like a little, like this, a little l'chaim, yeah, and get started. When a person is dwelling in sorrow, he can't learn properly. V'gam beistin hamitztarim lo yuchlu levarer adin ben kosher l'treifa. Interesting. Even a beistin is not able, who's suffering, cannot make a proper distinction between something which is kosher or not, ben heter l'isser, ben something that's permitted or not. A dayan is not allowed to drink before passing judgment, but that's a revius. He's not allowed to drink a revius. This amount would be okay. Gam atzar mevatel kavanas alev betfila. Look at this one. Anguish, sorrow, also nullifies a person's intention in his heart during prayer, implying you can have a little schnapps before davening. Not shachris, of course. Gam shadam shori batzar, also if a person's just generally unhappy, mishe medaber lav o mishe mevakesh mimenu lasois imo chesed, somebody who speaks to him and asks him to do for him some favor, and the koach lasos b'koshos, he's not motivated to do what the other person's asking. Uksiv, and it says, bes rotzoin anisicho. Basically, he's trying to give different scenarios how lethargy and sorrow and pain and anguish and sadness and depression paralyze a person. He's not necessarily suggesting that a person should drink wine in all these scenarios. He's just pointing out to you the positive side of wine insofar as it gives the person a little kickstart, helps him feel a little better, and therefore enables him to overcome this paralysis that sorrow and remorse usually causes, so that he'll be able to be more productive. That's what he means. And this is what a person, an intelligent person, should have in mind when he's drinking wine. But certainly has to be careful not to drink too much in a way which would affect his working or his learning. And he certainly has to be careful not to drink to an amount which would affect his learning or his prayer. Or to an extent which would cause him to act lighthearted and foolish. Nor should he drink to the extent that's going to cause him to start revealing his secrets or other people's secrets, because we spoke about how wine reveals secrets. Secrets of Torah, that's something else. We're not talking about that. But to use wine to reveal other people's secrets, and we know that wine has always been used for that purpose, right? That's not right. Lo yeh lecha hayayin lezara. So if a person does drink with the proper intentions that he's outlined here, wine will not be like a foreigner, meaning it won't be something which is harmful to him. Gam b'moadim u'regolim, also on holidays and festivals, asher ksiv behem, about which is said, v'somachtu lifnei Hashem lokecha, you shall rejoice before God. V'kosu v'samachtu b'chagecha, you shall be happy on your holiday. Lo yimshach atzmo b'yayin yoser min harui. Even on those times, you should not be involved in wine more than it's appropriate. How did he make the jump from holidays, happiness, wine? Because he's already brought verses which talk about how wine makes people happy, gladdens their heart, gladdens people in God. And so, since it's a mitzvah, v'samachta bechagecha, then simcha el basar v'yayin, it's from here that we learn that on the festivals, the person is actually fulfilling the Torah requirement to be joyful on the holidays through eating meat and through drinking wine. There are opinions that say that the eating of the meat that's being referred to here is eating the meat of the sacrifices that were offered in honor of those holidays. But that's not the case regarding wine, because there was no wine that was offered that you could drink. So even if you say that the meat that's referring to is meat of the sacrifices, which don't apply nowadays since we don't have them, wine is not referring to that. So any wine, it'll apply to any wine and therefore be applicable even today. So nowadays, even if you say that the eating of the meat that makes one happy and therefore fulfills the mitzvah of the holiday would not be able to be fulfilled because we don't have the sacrifices, we do fulfill that through wine. And halachically, it's considered to be a mitzvah to have a revius of wine at least once a day on every day of the holidays. Yeah, because wine makes one happy.
Is that on all the holidays, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Aside from Yom Kippur. I mean, it's referring specifically to the holidays. Specifically the Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. Lo yimshoch atzmo b'yayin yoser min harui, k'ne'emar, as it says, tachas asher lo avadato es Hashem Elokecha b'simcha u'betuv levav. Tachas asher lo avadato es Hashem Elokecha b'simcha u'betuv levav. Ha'lamadata shelo nitztavenu al simcha sheyishkach ba yotzer hakol. I was reading something else into the verse, but the verse says, the verse is criticizing the Jewish people for not serving God with joy. And it says, Tachas, on account of Asher lo avadata, you did not serve, Es Hashem Elokecha, at God, your God, B'simcha v'tuv levav, with happiness and with a glad heart. So if happiness is associated with wine, one has to be careful that his happiness is one which catalyzes his service of Hashem. But if through wine he does not serve Hashem, then that's not the type of happiness, even through wine, of course, that we're talking about. You can't serve God either with frivolity, like a lightheartedness, a light head, and not through laughter, meaning baseless, tasteless type of laughter, nor through inebriation, that is drunkenness. Okay.